Annyeong!
Annyeong! We're back!
Well, I was going to say welcome to another episode of the Dhal Sisters. Okay, so today we're gonna do a little bit of mukbang, along with giving you a whole lot of information about the K-pop industry. The mukbang is, drumroll, wasabi peas. My colleague at work, Susanna, would often bring these and we'd be munching on it at around 4 p.m. with our chai. And it's an interesting thing to eat. I'm not sure if most people can handle it as a snack. So,
She's been actually raving about this for a very long time, and we try to look for it every time we go to the supermarket, but we were not able to find it until recently, and so now I'm a little scared to be tortured by it.
let's try it.
Okay, we've opened the packet now, and we're gonna try it. It's my turn, friend?
Smell it, smell it.
Doesn't smell like very different. I can recognize the smell.
So it's, as you can see, pea-sized.
Oh my god. The first. It's only like spicy when it touches your tongue.
I feel like it was more pungent when I first ate it.
Yeah, it's pungent when it touches your tongue, I think, more than spicy.
But
The aftertaste is nice.
yeah, I felt like the first time I ate it, it went all through my nostrils and I was just like, oh my god!
That's happening to me, but not like itna intensity ki I will like cry.
Yeah.
But
But
it's like, yeah, like I can eat it. Should try it. Okay.
ooh, ooh. The more you eat, the more you can feel it in your nose.
Yeah. I can feel it on the back of my tongue actually. So apart from this, today we're, like she said, covering K-pop, and we're gonna give you the basic brief history of the industry and also the large key components of the music industry. So, yeah.
So let's get started. Before the establishment of the nation's Sixth Republic, South Korea only had two broadcasting networks which controlled what kind of music South Koreans listened to. Independent music was not a thing, and rock music was banned for being controversial. The music mostly was slow ballads or trot, and the focus was mostly on patriotic themes.
Yeah, but these things started to change around 1987 when the country's political stance became a bit more democratic and the radio broadcasting systems expanded exponentially. This meant Koreans had more exposure to different kinds of music. The K-pop industry and the music that we know today started at a crucial moment when a hip-hop band called Seotaji and Boys performed an interesting song. Seotaji himself was in a rock band, which was actually important in developing the rock music at the time in Korea, and later on started a hip hop band with two dancers. They appeared on a talent show and performed a very unique hip hop track at the time, which was very different and unexpected. They actually didn't score really well and didn't even go ahead in the competition.
Ended up being number
Ironically,
one.
the song ended up being number one for 17 weeks straight and is still considered one of the iconic moments in K-pop music. Unfortunately, Seotaji and Boys disbanded around 1996 at the peak of their popularity.
During 1995 to 1998, three entertainment companies showed up to the music scene. SM, YG, and JYP Entertainment. They are still around in South Korea right now, recruiting band members. So YG Entertainment was started by none other than a former member of the Sotaji and Boys, Yang Hyun-sik, and SM Entertainment was founded by Lee Soo-man, And he had a vision where he believed that music was going to be the next big export, and he kind of had this idea that people should start referring to it as, like made in Korea, have that stamp on it. So the first group that was founded by SM Entertainment was HOT, that became the next big thing in Korea. Following HOT's success, the first generation of K-pop idol groups then became a huge thing in Korea. And based on these groups, the three entertainment companies came up with, or rather perfected, the formula of idol groups.
So let's get into what this formula really is. People that start training for being an idol group start as young as their pre-teens, getting scouted by entertainment companies or even auditioning themselves relentlessly at that age. And once you get scouted or selected by an entertainment company, your training process begins, and this includes living in dorms with other trainees and going to special training schools. These training schools will hone your skills in music, dance, acting, and often even teach you how to behave in public so that they're prepared for their possible future celebrity lives. But this vigorous system was not invented in Korea. It's actually very similar to something that Motown did. You must have heard of the Jackson 5 and Supremes. Motown was responsible for famous bands like that and followed a very similar strenuous system. After all this relentless training, there is still no guarantee that you will actually debut or make it at the industry.
For example, let's talk about the Blackpink documentary that was released sometime last year. And so the girls talk about how at the beginning there were several different girls who were training with them, and every few days or weeks one girl would be sent back home, and then they were left with about 9 candidates. And the entertainment company started noticing how well these 4 girls who currently comprise Blackpink, how in sync they are and how well they complement each other, and like their camaraderie just showed through the practice session, and then that's how they were selected to become a band together. But sync is not the only component that's important for you to be part of an idol group. Not usually, every member does play a specific role in the band. Like there's a vocalist, there's a rapper, there's a dancer, and there's a visual. Yes, a visual. A person so breathtakingly beautiful that will ensure to draw in the crowds. And usually K-pop groups have anything between 4 to 18 members.
Yeah, it's a bit crazy. Since every group is tailor-made, as she explained, the groups usually appeal to a large number of fans. Fans of different groups are called fandoms and will often have their own fandom names. For example, BTS, which is short for Bangtan Sonyeondan, which also means Bulletproof Boy Scouts. Their fandom is called ARMY, which makes a lot of sense. And these are often abbreviated into English so that they have a global reach. There's a lot of things about fandoms actually which have the whole culture of their own. For example, when you get into a K-pop band first, there will usually be a member that you're drawn to the most, and that is termed as bias. There will also be a member that takes your attention away from your favorite member, and that is called bias wrecker. These terms may sound silly, but they become foundational questions when two K-pop fans meet and interact with each other. That's why I said there's a whole culture.
Yeah, it's almost immediate that you meet someone from, who's a K-pop fan, and you're like, who's your bias?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that's important is the whole aspect of events. And the live performances, which is why fans will also have these things called fan chants, which become important ways of connecting with the band. Another thing is fan cafes, which are official fan forums that are usually run by either the band or communities within fandoms. And there's also things like fan meetings, which are organized by the band's management, where bands actually perform special performances. They interact with fans one-on-one and have fan signings.
So the revenue of these entertainment companies heavily relies on the live element of these bands. And usually the songs will have a melody that is easy to hum and learn, and it'll have lyrics that you can sing to, and also dance moves that will get the fans involved. So a lot goes into making these live shows, along with releasing the album. It's all pre-planned, and there's a lot of meticulous thinking and planning and a big team involved. Every time a new album is released, it's called as a comeback, and the comeback can last for several months, where the band will promote their album through performing their promotional song at every talk show, variety show, radio show, and award functions. Usually there are different versions of the album, where they'll have Chinese, Japanese, and English versions of the same song. So it appeals to more countries and larger audience. Each album is made around a concept that has the band's main ideology as a recurring theme, and they'll have music videos explaining these concepts and themes, and it's pretty hardcore.
Yeah, and the subtext is usually so complicated that fans will come up with theories for months trying to figure it out. In fact, for BTS's Save Me timeline, there were so many stories that eventually, after so many years, Big Hit Entertainment had to make an entire webcomic series to help fans understand the concepts.
You can check it out too.
Yeah. So the theme of the music is not the only thing that has been changing, although in most of the years it has stayed tied to gender norms. So for example, girl groups or women of K-pop will usually adhere to typical things of femininity, like being cute or being adorable, often shy schoolgirls who are singing about their giddy crushes. And even if the concept is empowered women, they will still be looking for a man to take care of them in a lot of the music. The same thing goes for the boy bands as well, where there would be usually concepts of bad boy versus sophisticated man, sometimes both, or even this aspect of, rebelling, which is so tied to masculinity. Needless to say, it hasn't been a very conducive space for queer artists to express themselves, but that has been changing in the recent years, with idols finding very interesting and nuanced ways of singing about their identity, their experience, and even coming out. So yeah.
It's not just the themes that are evolving. The industry itself is going through shifts that are important to witness. There's an existential question in the industry right now, asking, what is even K-pop? Is it music that is made in South Korea? Is it music made in Korean language? Or is it just a particular sound that is categorizing K-pop as K-pop? So, although, K-pop has primarily been hip-hop, which also came under the fire because it was appropriating black culture. And but that's changing a little bit in the recent years, with artists trying out different genres like R&B, soul, rock, and indie. So there's a lot to look into when they're trying to make music that caters to everybody. The K-pop industry is, like we said, constantly trying to reinvent itself so that they can appeal to a larger global audiences. The live concerts took a big hit last year because of the pandemic. BTS had announced their, worldwide tour dates right before the global lockdown.
Yeah.
But that didn't stop them from having live concerts for their fans.
Yeah.
They had virtual concerts for everybody. Fans from all over the world tuned in to watch these concerts along with everybody else around the world. There's a live chat box with the the live concerts happening, and people who were saying that it's 4 a.m. where I am, it's 1 a.m. It's and it was so much fun to see how dedicated these fans are. And the whole virtual concert thing was a visual and experiential treat, because they had different sets for every song, and there were virtual environments that they had overlaid into the screens. And fans could connect their light sticks
to coordinate with the performance.
Through the Weverse app. And that's how the artists could also connect with the fans live.
Yeah. So the Weavers app, to explain a bit more, was a platform created by Big Hit Entertainment, the parent company of bands like BTS, TXT, and so on. And it was created as a direct platform for fans to interact with the favorite artists. But in this year, Big Hit has expanded it to multiple different entertainment companies and even going in collaboration with other public sector, private sector companies to expand their reach. This really makes fandoms an official professional platform almost to stay in touch with their favorite artists 24 by 7. And I think this really sheds light to how important fandoms are and the strength of fandoms themselves.
To talk about how dedicated and devoted fans are to their bands, is to give you an example of how I don't remember the song,
Yeah.
but there was a BTS song that had received some negative feedback, and Army did not take it very well. And what happened was, overnight they streamed the song in every country repeatedly,
Yeah.
so that in the morning it became the most streamed song and was charting number one.
Yeah, and this is common across bands. This happens for a lot of bands, and fandoms usually will plan ahead of every comeback and find release dates in advance so that they can globally coordinate through social media, streaming time, streaming hours, time slots. They even read up about the algorithm and research in depth to find out the engagement time required, what kind of screen settings and sound settings you need to be on for your view to get counted. And these, events are so loaded with the public and like fandom numbers that YouTube has even crashed so many times. Not just YouTube, other streaming platforms as well. So there's a lot of brain and intelligence involved in trying to get these artists to be successful. And not just that, it's not just the artists that fandoms care about. The sense of community transcends beyond K-pop itself. For example, during the Black Lives Matter protests, BTS donated $1 million, just like many other celebrities and global personalities were doing.
And Army matched that up within 24 hours.
24 hours. So there was a total donation of 2 million in just 2 days. And this doesn't end with Black Lives Matter. There are also a lot of grassroots social work that fandoms do in their own countries. They usually take up birthdays and anniversaries, important dates for careers, as important days where they go out, donate to NGOs, do community work, go on cleanup drives, raise money and awareness, and so on. So it's really a way to not just stay in that K-pop bubble, but kind of contribute to the world, which says so much about fandoms as a community.
And also sometimes they really want their artists to feel special.
Yeah.
So to give you a recent example again, on Kim Tae-young's birthday, which just back in December, fans managed to have his face on the Burj Khalifa for a total of 3 minutes and have his song played on a loop, and several of his images were on Burj Khalifa on his birthday. So Kim Tae-young now becomes the only other artist other than Shah Rukh Khan to be on the Burj Khalifa. Way to go, Army!
Yeah, so they're really unique when it comes to these kinds of ideas. So in conclusion, we really hope that you understand more about K-pop and give the genre its due credit, because it really deserves it. And also explore the genre because it's truly fun. We're speaking from experience. We've been engaging with it for the last couple of years and we've had so much fun. And more than anything, I think assumption that K-pop is a floozy genre and the people who listen to it don't have taste in music is a very gross and unfair oversimplification.
So their music making process is just as organic as any other global artist.
Yeah.
So give them a fair chance, and I hope you will go ahead and look for some K-pop songs on your music streaming apps and find a favorite one. If you want to get started with it, we have one of our old videos making recommendations. Maybe you can start with that. And we hope this has been a good experience learning about K-pop and wasabi peas.
Weird combination, but it was fun. Okay, see you guys soon. Bye.